band of freaks finds refuge and a new purpose in Doom Manor as the chief rescues them from their horrible pasts. In 1948, in a village in Paraguay, Mr. Morden visits von Fuchs, a German scientist who works undercover as a cobbler. Von Fuchs is known for his theoretical experimentation, offering certain enhancements for a price. Morden is tired of being an irrelevant, third-rate bad guy, so he's more than willing to pay for the scientist's help. As Morden enters a metal chamber, von Fuchs prepares the control panels. Before the procedure begins, he tells Morden to repeat after him and say, "The mind is the limit." After saying the phrase repeatedly, the chamber releases a blinding glow of light. Inside, Morden's body separates like a puzzle. In Florida, in 1988, in a luxury mansion, Kate Steele hears her daughter, Clara, crying, so she searches for the nanny to help. Unknown to her, her race car driver husband, Cliff, is cheating on her with the nanny, Giselle. Just as Kate approaches Giselle's room, the nanny suddenly opens the door, ready to take on her duties, while Cliff appears behind his wife, already holding their daughter. Despite this, Kate knows something is up. One day, Cliff attends a race, where he's assisted by his manager and navigator, Bump. Before he gets in the car, Kate tells him to crash and die, which Cliff interprets as a sarcastic and playful remark. The race begins, and Cliff notices that Bump seems to be occupied. As he passes by his station, he sees Kate caressing Bump and declaring that she's cheating on him with his manager through his mic. Furious, Cliff ends up colliding with another car. After the impact, he keeps repeating, "I don't know what happened to us. I'm going to be better." He then recalls his life before his fame, where he lived happily with Kate and a baby Clara. Soon, he wakes up to a man wielding his face, who shakes his head in disappointment. Going in and out of consciousness, Cliff sees a strange being made of light. He then sees the man introducing himself as Dr. Niles Caulder. Caulder tries to communicate with him, but Cliff can't talk. Eventually, Caulder tries teaching him how to control his body. No matter how hard Cliff tries, he still can't do it, so Caulder tells him to picture what it's like to move his head. Cliff imagines nodding to his daughter, and with this, he's able to move his head upon command. Caulder commends him, then explains that he's been in a terrible accident. Most of his body was beyond repair, but Caulder reassures him that he's close to fixing him. He then tells him to rest, and Cliff shuts down. Later on, Caulder teaches Cliff how to speak, and he repeats with his robotic voice. Suddenly, he spots the calendar behind Caulder, revealing the year to be 1995. He freaks out after discovering that he's been in this state for 7 years. He asks about his wife, so Caulder regrettably reveals that the whole world thinks that he's been dead since 1988. Cliff panics and demands to know what the man did to him. However, Caulder hastily shuts him down. Days later, Cliff wakes up to Rita Farr. She says that Caulder, whom they call Chief, is a good man, although he's odd and vague. Compared to Caulder, Rita is bluntly honest, so she reveals that the only part of his body that could be salvaged was his brain. To set his expectations correctly, she presents him with a mirror where Cliff sees his robotic body. Cliff panics and gets hysterical, so Rita shuts him off. Caulder arrives, reminding Rita that Cliff isn't ready, but the woman believes he deserves the truth. Soon, Caulder dresses Cliff in human clothes, hoping that it'll make him feel like himself. He explains that they're in Caulder's home, where individuals like him can find refuge and healing. Suddenly, Cliff asks where his wife is. The chief asks him what he remembers, but all he can recall are fragments of his fights with Kate and the accident. As he tells himself that Kate has probably already moved on, Cliff realizes that his memory is fractured. Caulder explains that he's experiencing dissociative memory, but assures him that his memories will return over time. Suddenly, a man wrapped in bandages enters the room, whom Caulder introduces as Larry Traynor. Larry takes Cliff on a tour around Doom Manor, wheeling him around in a trolley. He takes him outside to get some air, but Cliff can't even feel the breeze. He then asks what Larry's story is. In 1961, Larry worked as an Air Force test pilot in California. He hoped to be part of the government's Mercury mission, so he prepared for practically anything. However, as he tested the X-15 jet into space, he got exposed to radioactive energy, which cut the jet's power and sent it plummeting back to Earth. His comrades immediately drove to the wreckage, but as Larry emerged from the flames, his comrades were horrified at what he'd become. That day changed his life, and it took decades before his condition could ever be understood. In the evening in Doom Manor, Larry assists Cliff as he learns to walk with his robotic body. However, the noise annoys Rita, and she tells him that he can just try again tomorrow. Cliff asks Larry what her deal is, and he replies that Rita used to be an actress. Going back to his training, Larry tells Cliff that picturing where he wants to go might help him walk. However, this irritates Cliff as he has to learn everything from scratch. As he yells at Larry, he suddenly sees his daughter. Later, he tells Caulder about this, and the chief thinks using his daughter as motivation might help in allowing himself to walk again. Cliff asks if people ever get to leave Doom Manor, and Caulder replies that some come and go, but those who leave realize that it's hard for the world to accept what they've become. Despite this, Caulder promises Cliff that he'll be able to walk. The following day, Cliff watches a racing show when Rita sits beside him and asks if this is what he used to do. Cliff says yes, then asks her what her story was. Rita was a Hollywood actress that dominated the 50s cinema. In 1955, she shot a movie in Africa, but she couldn't focus because of the one-armed man who worked as a focus puller. For this, Rita demanded that he be replaced, despite the director insisting that he was the best for the job and that the crew loved him. Later, Rita shot a scene near a dock in the river. When she noticed that the one-armed man had been replaced, she finally agreed to act. However, she saw that the people around her knew of her discriminative behavior, making her conscious. She acted anyway, and as she walked closer to the boat, the dock collapsed, causing her to fall into the water. Despite this, the crew took their time before helping her. As she struggled to reach the surface, she accidentally unleashed a strange volcanic gas, which entered her mouth. When the boatman saved her, she noticed that everyone was horrified to see her. Her assistant handed her a mirror, leading her to realize that her face and body had deformed as if it was melting. Rita stormed off even when her legs started drooping. She eventually met Caulder and ended up in Doom Manor. As she recalls her past, she devours a whole rotisserie chicken out of stress. The following day, Cliff tries his exercise on the stairs again. He remembers how he used to teach Clara how to walk, so Larry tells him to use that as motivation. Cliff does this and finally reaches the top of the stairs. He learns to walk in his new body, then uses his newly learned skill to head to Caulder's room. With a small victory, Cliff musters the courage to tell Caulder that his family must know that he's alive. Whether they terminate or keep him, they should know he's still there. Hearing this, Caulder congratulates him for learning how to walk. Then he explains how he only wanted Cliff to have a second chance. The man thanks him, then Caulder gives him a voicemail that he replicated from Cliff's brain. Cliff gets shocked as he hears himself say, "I don't know what happened to us. I'm going to be better." He recalls saying this from his fragmented memory, so he proceeds to listen to the recording. This triggers a memory, revealing how he avoided the collision and won the race. He beat up Bump as he received the trophy, then he continued his affair with Giselle. However, he felt a sense of guilt, so he called Kate to ask for another chance, promising to be better. She forgave him, but as Cliff picked up his family to start anew, they crashed into a truck. This is where his memory ends, so Caulder informs him that he's the only survivor of the accident. Hearing this drives Cliff mad, causing him to punch a gas tank in rage. His recollection of the accident sends him into years of depression. This was until Larry introduced him to building a massive slot car race track, which Cliff found therapeutic. In 2019, Larry and Cliff are tinkering with the racetrack while Rita knits. Suddenly, they hear a girl's voice from downstairs, making Larry and Rita groan as they recognize that it's Crazy Jane. Jane has 64 personalities, each having its own special power. That day, she's Sylvia with a spooky and moody voice. Caulder demands to speak to the real Jane, but she only releases Hammerhead, her rude persona. Suddenly, Hammerhead sees Cliff, so she approaches him and asks if he's a toy. She acts rudely to him, so he tells her to shut up. She then demands to enter his room, but he refuses, causing Hammerhead to grab him aggressively. When she realizes that he can't feel pain, she abruptly leaves. The following day, Cliff finds her painting in the garden. This time, she's Jane, and she says that they've already met through Hammerhead. Cliff reassures her that it wasn't Hammerhead's fault when they got into that heated argument. He was also on edge because it's Clara's birthday next week, which also happens to be the 30th year that he hasn't been with her. Suddenly, it rains, and Jane switches to her other personality, the Hangman's daughter. She becomes sad and emotional, talking about what it feels like to be normal. She realizes that Cliff relates to her, and since then, the two have become friends. Life in Doom Manor proceeds accordingly, so Caulder feels comfortable enough to leave them temporarily and resume his travels. Before he leaves, he explains how there are mysterious things in the world that bear keeping an eye on. The chief's absence allows the group to do anything they want. Their little adventure begins when Jane paints Larry's school bus black. She convinces the others to go on a little rendezvous in Cloverton, a nearby town, but only Cliff is down for it. Larry refuses to go since Caulder believes they're not ready to be in the world. Jane then talks up Rita, teasing her that the world hasn't seen her in 60 years. Rita knows Jane is just playing with her ego, but it still works, so she convinces Larry to join them too. As they arrive, the group decides to split up and explore the town. Rita goes to a diner and Jane insists on buying a gift for Cliff's daughter. Meanwhile, Larry hesitates to step out but ultimately goes to a bar. When they get the gift, Cliff and Jane sit in the park. He talks about Clara and shares how he was always the one who bought his daughter's gift. Clara's birthday was days before the accident, but he was so occupied with his own infidelity that he forgot to buy her a gift again. Elsewhere, Rita meets a waitress that knows her old movies. The waitress praises her, expressing how she looks like the actress. She talks about how Rita got her and her father through tough times. Relishing all the praise, Rita tells the waitress to talk more about it. However, they get to a point where the waitress calls Rita a drunkard and how her father collected her explicit films. Hearing this makes Rita's face droop. In the park, Jane presses Cliff to question what Caulder said about his daughter. He insists that Clara's dead, but Jane reveals that his life had been all over the internet, including the fact that Clara was deemed as the sole survivor of the crash. She brings out her phone to prove this, but Cliff crushes the device in his palm, telling her to shut up. Meanwhile, Larry gets bothered by people staring at him in the bar. This reminds him of when he had to hide something inside of him. Even before his accident, Larry considered himself a monster for having an intimate relationship with one of his comrades, who led the team to his rescue when his jet crashed. This recollection triggers the negative energy inside of him, so he leaves the bar in a hurry. In the park, officers note Cliff and Jane's argument, so they try to intervene only for Hammerhead to start taunting them. Meanwhile, Rita explodes into her blob form, shattering the diner's windows as she expands into the streets. The others witness the chaos, so Jane yells at Rita, hoping to wake her. Larry runs to help but collapses and the negative energy escapes his body. The energy travels through the cables and causes accidents. Meanwhile, a school bus filled with children gets trapped in the middle of the road. Rita is approaching the vehicle, so Cliff immediately jumps into action, ripping a section of the road to block Rita's path. The break in momentum allows her to recollect herself, then she asks Cliff to go home. That night, Caulder hears the news, and as he drives past Cloverton to see the damages, he gets concerned by the presence of an ominous donkey in the streets. He returns to the manor and reprimands the group for the mess they've caused. After emphasizing that they don't know what they've done, Caulder heads to his office and recovers a picture of a hooded man with the same donkey he saw. When the group exposed themselves to Cloverton, they also exposed him and themselves to some enemies. Caulder returns to the group and tells them that they have to leave town. When Jane expresses that it's too drastic, Caulder reprimands her for being the ringleader. Cliff defends her, diverting the topic to Caulder's lie about Clara's death. Caulder argues that he was only trying to save Cliff from being rejected by his daughter, but the man points out that he robbed him of the chance to reconcile with her. Still, Caulder notes that there are monsters in the world, and they're none of them. He insists they should run away, but Cliff thinks they should stay and safeguard the town from these other monsters. The rest of the group doesn't agree with him and prefers to go with Caulder. They immediately get on the bus and leave Doom Manor while Cliff stays behind to defend Cloverton. While driving, Jane gets a change of heart and she initiates helping Cliff. Although Caulder refuses, Rita agrees and Larry groans, knowing he has no choice but to join in. They head back to Cloverton and see Cliff by the streets. Before Rita leaves Caulder, he tells her that this is wrong and she agrees that it is. Still, she promises to be back for him. Then she leaves to join the others. As they walk into town, Rita's foot expands into a blob, proving just how nervous she is. However, the group reassures her that they can pull this off. On the bus, Caulder can feel the vehicle shaking. He says Paraguay, then a man behind him appears, repeating the word. Caulder recognizes him as Morden. Meanwhile, the group finds a donkey blocking their path. It suddenly releases green gas that forms a phrase in the air that says, "The mind is the limit." Morden admires the freaks that Caulder created, then he threatens to do something fun with them. With that, he creates a vortex that begins sucking in all of Cloverton, making the Doom Patrol freeze in panic, realizing just how doomed they are.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.